Hey guys, Dan here.
And Frank, and we're joined today by Ross Radke, creator of Stomped, Spandex, and Build a Platypus is his latest project, and coming up soon is the Zoop Stomped Deluxe Edition. And yeah, Ross, why don't you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a comic book writer and artist, and I've been self-publishing through Kickstarter since 2020. So I've released 4 issues of Stomped, which is a um, kaiju anthology series. I've collaborated with other artists on that series, and so I'm excited that Zoop is another crowdfunding platform. So if you're not familiar with them, they um, kind of kind of in between a traditional publisher and a crowdfunding, where they will actually help with some of the promotion, and they'll help with some of the behind the scenes printing and shipping things that on the fulfillment end that takes a lot off of my plate as a creator. So yeah, I've had some modest success through Kickstarter, and enjoy that community. But I was really looking forward to working with the people over at Zoop, and tackling this collection, because it's going to be a lot bigger just in terms of page count alone. It's going to be collecting all 4 issues plus some new stories. So I think we're looking at it being about 180 pages, I think, and it's going to include all the
Wow.
yeah,
Oh wow.
everything that has been released so far, and some extra goodies as well.
Yeah, I saw you working on a couple of stories. It looks like we're gonna get a story about the first kaiju that emerged, and then it looked like you got something with kaiju poop.
Yeah, um, yeah.
That's what you were working on.
So okay, so the 2 new stories. So this collection is going to be um, rearranging the stories chronologically to the in universe storyline timeline, and each
Oh,
yeah, so
right.
each of the individual issues has a little synopsis page at the beginning. And so one of the new things is I'm expanding that out into like a 6 page kind of prologue. So for that, I'm getting all the artists back to each do a half a page. So it's broken up into half page with some narration, and it's kind of like an art jam
Oh,
intro
that's
that
pretty
kind of
cool.
gives you just a flavor, like a little flavor of everything that is going to be in the rest of the book. And so having fun with that. I've got a little bit of the art from some of the other artists. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of it come in soon, hopefully. Um, so that's the new prologue, and then I'm adding a story that I'm writing and drawing myself. That is going to be a new 12-page story. It you know pretty standalone. There's a little bit like most of the Stomp stories do. There's some connective tissue, some little cameos and things by characters that have appeared in other stories. But um, yeah, that the thing about the anthology, like, it's when I originally was writing the stories for the single issues, I always, imagined and meant for it to be collected together, but the stories were more self-contained, and just as the project developed over, spreading 4 Kickstarter campaigns over several years, I started to realize that people were um, connecting with some of the characters and some of the different plot elements that were being introduced, and so I tried to weave the stories a little bit more together while still functioning as
Connect some dots. Yeah.
standalone issues. Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting for people who have read the
No.
single issues to read them all together, because I think, like, I was even just going back and reading them myself, and more of a narrative had been forming than even I realized. Um, I mean, obviously, I wrote it, so it's kind of like a happy accident, I think. But
Yeah.
there is like a little bit of a meta
Yeah, but
narrative
but even
arc.
with
Yeah,
yeah, but even with just having like a little bit of connective tissue within each story, I feel like that developed, and like you're like I know like every single time we have the campaign, I would go back and read the previous issue to be like, okay, well, the previous issues to be like, okay, well, what are references, what are here, like,
Yeah,
going back and forth. So to see it in chronological, I think it's going to be an interesting way of reading
yeah.
it.
I hope
Yeah.
so because
Yeah, I just reread all four of them this week too.
yeah, no, I think that it's always interesting to get hear back from people who've been reading the books who other than the other artists that I've worked with, and getting different theories or different takes on it. Because as a writer, I know what my intentions are, but it's interesting how sometimes stuff that I think is clear, people have different takes on, and then sometimes stuff that I think is more subtle, like everyone catches on to right away. So yeah, it was a really good way of like kind of getting
Yeah.
into. This is like my first big project as a comic creator, uh, and it's been an interesting, how it's had just developed over the last few years for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was hooked when I read the first. I believe I came on just after the second issue. I picked up one and two, I think, direct from your store, a little before the third campaign, and then I was like hooked. And then I ended up getting the digital of the Madrid uh, comic, which I was like, all right, I gotta get that in there too. Is that going to be part of this deluxe
That's the
edition?
only thing that I'm not including because I am planning on expanding that into a full like one shot issue. Um, like
Yeah, I remember you had mentioned that you were working on like a Kim
yeah,
story, and then even at the end of that, when you do mention, you're like, "Oh, I'd like to develop this into a full."
yeah. So
All
so
right.
the original idea for Stomped was like I had a story idea, and I knew it was too large for me to tackle. At that point, I was still working long hours. I was a manager at Walmart. I was working like 60-hour work weeks, and I was like, I'm never gonna get
Oh
anything
wow.
done. So like that's why I kind of broke it into this anthology and reached out to other artists. That was like just a necessity. It's like, well, I'm not gonna be able to sit down and draw, you know, 20 pages of a single issue myself, let alone a whole 80 to 100-page graphic novel. But I could probably tackle, I started with 8, and then it grew to 10, and then it grew to 12 pages. But yeah, I wanted to start small and just kind of expand it. And so after this collection gets released through Zoop, the next big project will be going back to that original idea, telling Kim Corrigan's story. So she's a character who appears in a few of these stories in the anthology. Gonna explain her history and kind of set the stage for a larger narrative that I have planned, hopefully several volumes. So that Madrid story that I did is would be fitting somewhere in the continuity after the first volume of the main storyline. So I want to kind of I don't know. I'm not telling a linear story. It's kind of hopping around.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Like, yeah. So I mean, yeah. There's even in the fourth issue, you kind of have that timeline breakdown of like, all right, this event happened that day with the whole map and everything. One of the things when I noticed with that, and I noticed it on the second read through this week, the one of my favorite stories is the Eye for an Eye story with the whole skydiving opening sequence, like the Power Rangers, basically. Um, is that sample that they take from the Eye what eventually becomes the mass,
It could be. Yeah.
or am I
I
reading
haven't
too?
like I haven't. There was a few things that kind of changed as the project was being developed. So there's let me see. Hold on a sec. Um,
I know you have so many notes. That's one of my favorite things about these two is the notes at the end of them because you go into so much detail about the backstory and everything.
So there's this tooth that's or claw or something that's prominently featured in the first issue, and originally that was going to be a thing. There was going to be a story about where that tooth fragment came from, and then I just sort of forgot about it. So, um, you know, like the bit of eye gunk was what that original tooth story kind of turned into. But logistically, I couldn't figure out how they were going to get a chunk of a tooth. So, yeah, I don't know. So some like I could go back and still revisit that if I wanted to. And that's kind of like something I kind of steal from Hellboy and the BPRD. The way that Mike Mignola and his collaborators have crafted that universe is you leave yourself little breadcrumbs, and if you revisit them, people think you're a brilliant writer, and if you don't, it doesn't matter because everyone else forgot about it too. If people keep asking what was that thing,
exactly.
Like Mike Mignola, there's the aliens in the first volume of Hellboy, and everyone is like, "What are the aliens? What are the aliens?" So finally, he, eventually got back and kind of expanded on them a little bit, but it functions well just as its own little weird thing in the story, and so like I love that as a writer. I love that as a reader as well. Just these little things that like maybe that's just its own little thing that happened in that universe, and it's not part of a more important or larger narrative. But if I can find a way to roll it back in, like absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's the great thing about the anthologies. You're making all these breadcrumbs. You've seen. Maybe you didn't like one story more than the other, but I've loved them all. And then even in that story, we got introduced to Sophia in there, Daria, and what was that, issue 3? Was that issue 3 or 4?
Issue 3, yeah.
But she's another cool character. Yeah, she's another great character too that I'm like, oh, I want to see more of that one. And of course, I love seeing Kim throughout the series and all these little stories with her dad and her and how they connect to all these other events. She's an incredible character. And how did you come up with her specifically? Did you always have her in mind as like the central character? I know you had mentioned that you want to do something big, and that's part of what this whole one shot was eventually going to be. But was it always going to be her?
Yeah. So let me I think I've talked about this a little bit in some of the like back matter in some of the books, but Emerald City Comic Con every year does an art book called Monsters and Dames. Yeah. Yes. And so one year, just for fun, like as a piece in my portfolio, I did this drawing of a woman, stretching her neck with the monster impaled on the Space Needle, just because I thought it would be a funny image. And like immediately the wheels started turning, and I had another portfolio thing that I've been working on and off for years that I just kept abandoning it. And the basic premise was like a Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy analog kind of characters are on a date, and then like monsters or aliens or something attack, and they both do the classic like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, oh, and then like so they both were superheroes and they didn't know that, like they're just on a date as civilians. And so that little story kind of became the starting point of the story Blind Date in the first issue of Stomped. And so I kind of took that and in this character that I had drawn in that just one standalone image and kind of merged those two. And from there, I mean, I don't want to get, I don't want to get too much into spoilers for what I have planned for like the graphic novel.
No, definitely. No,
but a few of the themes that I was interested in like looking at through character is like, what if Superman was a recovering drug addict, or what like one of the kind of early ideas for Stomped was like adult Powerpuff Girls, and so like I had these little elevator pitch
I could see
ideas
that. No, I could totally
that
see
kind
that.
of you know will make more sense as the story progresses. I think if you've just read the anthology, you don't see that. Um, but that's where it started,
Yeah.
and that's where it's kind of like I'm steering it back towards that initial direction.
Yeah, because I have seen that there's that you have those little PSA tidbits in there too. So there is that one where they're like, oh, don't misuse kaiju parts or whatever as chemicals or whatever, because it's like the one kid's like, oh, maybe if I drink this kaiju's blood, I'll turn into a superhero, and then it's kind of like Kim's there to take it away.
Yeah, yeah. Those PSAs were. I don't remember. Like,
I think that was
I
the
don't remember
fourth
like
one.
why. So Matt Strackbine, aka the Letter Hack, he's done two of them, and like the first one is obviously heavily inspired by a PSA that's in the Iron Giant, which is itself a reference to an actual PSA during the Cold War, where they're like, if you hear the bomb siren, hide under your desk and you'll be fine. And it's the most
Yes.
ludicrous thing in the world.
Yeah.
And like the one in the movie The Iron Giant is like almost exactly the same as the actual PSA. So like it wasn't that hard to like, okay, now we're gonna like do the stomped version of that. Like what do you teach kids if you lived in a world, and this is kind of coming back to like the overall like idea of stomped and the genesis of stomped is like, if you lived in a world with giant monsters, what would that be like to like the day to day for the average person? And like what, yeah, how would that impact kids lives growing up knowing that some giant lizard or insect creature could just appear in their neighborhood, the way that like an earthquake or a tsunami or other natural disaster could occur. And like I don't want to get too dark, but like school shootings and things, like kids are growing up now with
Yeah.
like more of an awareness of danger, I think, than like I remember growing up with as a kid. And I think some of that
Yeah.
is fueling the way I approach the human characters in Stomped. Yeah.
No, no,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, I talk about that at work a lot because I work in a school, and I'm like, back in the day, I'm like, we used to be able to like walk wherever we wanted, go down the block to a school, and I'm like, I was a kid in elementary school. I'm like, nowadays, if you see a kid at the age we were walking down the street, you're like, yo, where the hell is this
Yeah.
kid going? Like, kids don't go anywhere anymore on their own.
Yeah. No,
It's a much different
yeah, and
world.
I don't have kids, but like that's my impression is that like it's a different world than the one I grew up in, which is a different world than our parents grew up in, and it's I
Yeah,
don't necessarily know if it's better or worse, but it's different for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's for sure. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's just like they always say, like with millennials, it's just like we have like a history changing event like every single week that we've lived through. And it's just like the way it is. And I was like, oh yeah, it is what it is. Like I have a feeling like that's kind of how some of these people feel. It's just like, yeah, another monster.
Yeah,
I still have my day job I gotta
I
worry
think that's
about.
some of like the dark humor that is baked into Stomped is this kind of how easily like we just accept things as normal, and how like we will react to that and try to figure out how to go on with our day-to-day routines, and and like there's always going to be someone trying to take advantage of that, someone trying to make a profit off of that, and so there's little
Oh yeah.
bits of world building that are again not not being spelled out, but there's a couple stories where I call them bunker burbs, but it's like whole neighborhood development that like every house has like a bunker underneath it in case a kaiju walks through your neighborhood. You can shelter at home, and there's an escape
like
hatch in the yard.
like the pizza
You
epi-
know, in case your house topples
Yep, like
down.
the pizza
Yeah.
delivery story.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like little things like that. It's like, yeah, what would people do if the threat of Godzilla or King Ghidorah or something was actually real? And it's like, yeah, so you'd start to impact um, housing. It would start to impact, people would move
Yeah.
away from the cities potentially, move away from the coasts. The pop culture and food industry, like all these things, technology would all be influenced by that. And I've tried to keep it, like, in a weird way, I've tried to keep the stories grounded, even though there's some really fantastic like sci-fi elements. Um, I
Yeah.
want those to feel,
It definitely does feel
yeah.
grounded.
I
Yeah.
want the special stuff to feel special still, um, and like so there's not a lot of characters with powers. There's not um, it's not like a Super Sentai type of thing.
Yeah.
There's not giant robots. That was like one of my rules. I was like, I'm just not going to do giant robots, just like see what I could come up with instead
Yeah.
of that.
I
Yeah.
like it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, Kim so far is the only like super powered one we've seen. I know you did like that kind of pin up at the end of the Eye for an Eye issue, and it was like her, Sophia, or maybe that was the third issue. Her, Sophia, and Daria, and then I don't know who the fourth one was in that
Yeah,
pinup.
that
It was like four girls. They looked almost like a team. I don't know if that's somebody coming down the line,
yeah, that character hasn't been
or if it's just
introduced
somebody
yet.
that I'm like, oh, I just can't. But I was like, all right, is this like the Powerpuff Girl team that you were referencing
Yeah,
there?
yeah. I mean, that's the idea. I mean, and because I included that bit of artwork in there, like it's not going to be a huge surprise that there is I have an idea of like forming a team of these characters. But hopefully it's
Yeah,
by the time that we get there, um, I don't want to be too precious about ideas because I think a lot of it just comes down to execution, and so I don't
yeah,
worry too much about spoilers in terms of big concept stuff. Where I want to avoid is like
yeah,
getting into the nitty gritty of who the characters are, because I think that's what makes it an interesting read, and that's what I want people to like discover on the
yeah.
page.
Yes, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, every little story. I mean, like I said, I just reread them all this week. It's probably going to be like the fourth time, maybe fifth time I reread them. Pretty much any time we reviewed these, I reread the whole thing. And I was texting Dan. I'm like, I forgot how good these are because it's been a while since the fourth issue. I think that was 2022, so it's been about 2 years now. So I'm like, I haven't read this in like 2 years, and I was like, wow. I'm like, these are really good. And just each story is just such a fun read.
Thank you.
Yeah. For me, one of the things about the Stomp series I always found like super interesting was like each issue has like 3 to 4, if not more, different like unique kaiju designs in it. Like, how do you come up with like, okay, this issue we're gonna like this is gonna be the kaiju for this issue and all that other stuff? Because this like they're very intricate designs as well. Like they're not just like
Yeah, I mean, I see you doodling there all the time. I love that's one of my favorite things about it, seeing all your ideas. I'm like, you're just drawing all
Yeah,
day.
yeah. I mean, for every kaiju design that appears in the comic, there's probably a dozen more, designs that I didn't use, if not more. And I I wanted so like I'll answer this question in terms of like how I explained it to the other artists. So I kind of gave them some loose guidelines for the overall aesthetic of the kaiju because I wanted there to be a lot of diversity, but I also wanted there to be a sense that they all belonged in this world. So I was like, start with nature, start with insects, reptiles, crabs, sea life. It's like start. I always think that nature's going to come up with something more interesting than what I could come up with just using my imagination. So like absorb as much of that influence as possible. I just went to at the OMSI is like a museum here in Portland, and they have a exhibit right now called Exquisite Creatures. And Christopher Marley is the artist. He takes dead animals and creates art with them. And sometimes it's just like one, like a mounted animal, like a kind of like taxidermy. But a lot of times it'll be like big patterns and designs like arranged out of beetles and butterflies and lizards and things. And it's I'd seen pictures of this stuff, and the experience of seeing it in person was totally different. Actually being able to see these animals in 3 dimensions, and so like one there's a wall of just crabs, and like I know there's lots of weird crabs, but like seeing about probably had to be at least 50 to 100 different crabs, and every single one is like so unique, and like all the different shapes and patterns and things, like all of that is just fuel for creature design. And it's so like I was really inspired going to that yesterday. And
Yeah, I think I saw you posted
yeah,
something about that. It looked really cool.
so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I've always like been fascinated by animals and nature. And so different types of body plans, like one of my rules was if this could be a guy in a rubber suit, it's not good for Stomped, so like don't try to avoid bipedal kind of your kind of classic Showa era Godzilla and Gamera kind of looks, or like Ultraman. Try to avoid the guy in a suit look, and then most of them I always like say like add some more eyes. There's just little eyes here and there.
Yes.
I and that
Yes, a lot of them have a lot of eyes. I
and
like it.
so like part of that was like I don't remember, like scallops. I think like scallops have tiny little blue eyes along the rims of their shell, and like I always thought that was super weird. And I think that's where like the eye thing came from. And then obviously like insects have a lot of eyes, but I like the idea that these things are so big that what the head can see, like that might not be translating to its legs or tail that's like yards away, right? So it's got eyes in other
Yeah.
parts of its body, so it's kind of sensing more of the environment around it. And then there's a couple that don't have any eyes at all, and so like these aren't like concrete rules, but I think just having a little bit of a few basic principles. Oh, and like the other thing is like most of them have some little bit of an uncanny valley thing where like they have like human teeth or little hands, something a little bit creepy. And that's it's like so far all the artists I've worked with, I've knocked it out of the park. Like everyone has taken those guidelines and then come up with something that doesn't look like anything else that has appeared in the universe so far. So that's been one of like the highlights of being able to write this and collaborate with other artists is like once someone comes out with a new design, like maybe I might have a little bit of notes, but usually it's just like, okay, now that's part of the overall like look of these creatures, and I can start to borrow a little bit from all of them for the next one, and or find a way of like, okay, these two don't look anything alike, what's something that could be like in the middle, and then like now there's kind of like a link between them. So I don't know, it's fun. Like I've been drawing monsters my whole life. That's why I created this world to play in.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, you're an incredible writer, but you're also an incredible artist, man. I mean, did you do all the art on Build a Platypus,
Yeah.
right? That was all
Yeah,
you, right?
Build the Platypus is the first thing I
Yeah.
did
It was,
everything on. Colors, letters, yeah.
yeah. I really enjoyed reading it. A really fun cryptid story with the chupacabra and everything. And then, but do you have any particular of the monsters that you've created? Any favorites of the designs? One of my favorites is the Shoni. Shoni, is that how it's pronounced, from the Might Bot, the Bot Might, the
Yeah.
Might Bot story?
I think so.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones with the eyes down the
That
tail.
one was
and the whole
designed
side.
by Guy Pradell, who did the art for that one, and that was one where like he sent me a whole bunch of different designs, and I was like, I kind of like that dolphiny looking one. Just put some more eyes on it. Like that was my only note for him on that one. But like other than that, because that one's probably the closest to looking like a classic, like kaiju.
Yeah, it's the only one that comes to mind.
But even that one, it's still like its arms are a little bit more like flippers than arms.
Yes. Yeah, the way it moves, it almost looks like there's a one panel where it almost looks like the way it's walking, it's almost like it's swimming through the city. It looked like.
One thing that's like pangolins, the way that pangolins walk, kind of inspired a lot of, I think, the kaiju, because they do walk on their hind legs, but they have like really long tails, and I think that's like the only. It's just such a weird animal, and so like even if the kaiju looks nothing like a pangolin, like a lot of them kind of have that same balance of like, you know, they're walking on their hind legs, and then you've got the long tail on one end, and then they kind of taper towards their head in the front.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And then the other one I really liked was the Hercules beetle looking kaiju from the fourth issue. That was another great design.
That one's like, so yeah, I think that's the weirdest one that I created. I don't even know if I like that one, but it was so weird, and I just like, I don't know, I was like, okay, like whatever.
It was weird, but that's what kind of like what I liked.
I don't think I ever even drew like its bottom half. Like I don't even.
Weird teeth.
It's like vaguely lobster like.
Yeah, because it's like it's like in the background kind of like you don't really get a full body view of it.
Yeah, even in like
huge.
the kaiju size chart, it's obscured. Can't really see, but no, I don't know. I think my I mean, I don't want to pick favorites out of the artists that I worked with, but I always say that like Andre Diaz's Mantis for the first issue kind of like that kind of established the parameters.
Yes.
Yeah, it did set set the tone.
It really I feel like that one was like a given. That's why I was like, I'm not gonna say that one. I really like that's a great
that
story
one.
Too.
Yeah, that one.
I don't know. It's just it kind of like I'm almost jealous that he was the one who came up with that design, because it feels like instantly the most iconic out of all of them, and like I'm always like, okay, I can give myself a little credit, because when I sent him thumbnails for the script, and like in the thumbnails I drew like a vaguely triangular head.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, I can take a little bit of credit, but he took this terrible little doodle and then sent this amazing creature design that was like full colored and everything, and I was just like, perfect. I was like, this is amazing, and that was the first time I'd ever worked with another artist, and it was just like all of the designs he did, because he made the hybrid, the ape kaiju, and I was like, this is just like I don't know how he pulled that out of my brain and like made it even better by incorporating like different types of apes, like gorilla and like baboons and mandrills and things. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of like some of my favorite designs are ones that didn't end up using, because I just felt like they didn't quite fit the story, like the way that their body moved or something. So I don't know. It's hard to pick like a personal favorite out of mine, but I kind of like the one in the first one that I did, the I call it Willy, but it looks vaguely whale-like with the like I was talking about, like the
Oh
pangolin
yeah, that
posture.
was
Yeah,
yeah
Yes.
the first state story. Yeah, that one's too the first state story. Yes, yeah. It's there's just so many cool designs. That's what like one of my favorite things about the series is just every story you're getting something a little different. Even in the Mightbot one, I forget the
I think
title
I
of
just
that
called it
one,
Mike.
but there's even like another hybrid that's like the
Yeah.
orangutan.
Oh,
What
I
was
think
that?
that one's just called Mite. I think.
No, it's just Might, yeah. Because I'm thinking of Botfly right now because I was rereading some Spandex too before, so that's why I keep throwing Bot in there. Yeah, Spandex is just I love that too, man. I mean, I I was anytime those came up and I got the Webtoons notification, I was like, oh, I'm reading this right
Yeah,
away.
I mean, I wish I had more time in the day. I work a full-time day job. I have more ideas than I have time to execute.
Yeah, no,
My kind of, like I said, the big project next year is I want to kind of finally get to that main story for Stomped, but I want to try to, um, you know, I want to keep doing more Build the Platypus. I want to keep doing more Spandex, and I'm hoping I can start to build some momentum. I moved this year. I moved twice. I moved to Portland in June,
oh wow,
and then I moved into a new apartment just in October. So, and then started
oh
a new
wow.
job. So that kind of took, it like took a lot of out of me. I don't even know how I got that issue of Build the
Yeah,
Platypus done this
Oh
year.
yeah.
To be honest, like I worked on that.
it was
I worked on that
impressive.
mostly. Like I took a month off in between jobs when I moved, and I like, you know, I can't even just relax when I take time off. I've got to be constantly like working on the next project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that Build the Platypus campaign it was, uh, I would say it was very like, incredibly successful for no PR, no nothing, just like hey, I made this comic book.
yes. I was like,
And,
when you threw that out there, I'm like, wow, he's just taking a risk. He's just throwing it out
Yeah,
there, and I think you have enough of following now that I think that almost anything you put out will be successful, man. I mean, you do a
thank you.
great job.
Yeah, that
and the art for that was
that was
so
kind of
good
by
too.
design. Like I was curious. I'm like, what if I just put something out there and like, not that I didn't take the Kickstarter campaign seriously, but I was like, I was curious to see could I still hit a decent goal with the minimum amount of like effort, and like social media was all splintered and broken around that time too, and I was like really just hoping that the
Yeah,
people who'd supported my last few projects would all come back and support it, and I'm so grateful that they did. It came down to the wire. I mean, it was in the last 24 hours that it hit the funding
it
goal,
did. Yeah,
and that was a learning experience for me. I'm definitely like gonna be ramping up promotion for Stomped anthology uh, for Zoop over the next couple months. We do have I haven't officially announced like the launch date. We are launching in January, um, and I'm really hoping to
all right.
have basically like I just want to have it all done so I can just hand it to them right right when the campaign starts, and just not have to
Yes,
sweat.
I know that was one of the things you put in there in the notes. I think it's like one of your. I think it was at the first issue. It was like your tips for Kickstarter campaigns. You like have the comic done just so that you could have it ready to go at the campaign
Yeah,
start.
yeah, doing promotion like it's not. I don't think it comes naturally to most creators. I think some people are a little bit more comfortable with like the various social media, or more have the deeper pockets to pay for advertising and things like that. And I've always kind of been. I feel like I've just been very gradually over time, just like connecting with other fans of the same things that I enjoy. And it's like, I feel weird calling people who support my projects my fans. It's like, I feel like we're all part of the same community. We all watch the same type of movies, we all read the same type of comics, and, um, and I do like to kind of have that sense of community, but, um, there like there's a point where
Yeah.
where you kind of hit the you're like, how do I grow from here, right? How do I continue to expand, and whether
Yeah.
that's continuing with one project or pivoting and working on another project. Like I've have a few different things plates spinning in the air at the same time. Um, and I hope that everyone likes everything that I do, but like I also am okay with the idea that like Milagro in particular, the graphic novel that I drew, written by Matt Strackbine and Guillermo Zagara, that's not for everyone. That's definitely like has a niche audience, I would think, um, but like it also has an audience.
I haven't read that one
Yeah,
yet.
it's got an audience that is different than the people who like, who would like Stomped or Build a Platypus. Obviously, some crossover, but that one's definitely more of like a grindhousey, violent action comic. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's fun. I have very eclectic
Yeah.
tastes.
Yeah. No, it's cool to be into like so many different things, and like I said, Spandex is you did that whole September, and I've seen that whole roster of heroes and villains that you have. I mean, I don't know how you come up with all those different characters, but I mean that Spandex universe could be like something even bigger than this. I feel like, and I loved Stomp.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like. It's so funny because I don't even read that many superhero comics anymore. I really like. I
Me
really
neither.
like creators who get to like work on something for a really long time. So like Invincible or Savage Dragon or
Yeah.
Hellboy, some of these creator owned titles where it's been like the same writer artist team, or in some cases like just one guy doing it for years and years and years. That's really interesting to me. I've started reading more manga lately, and it was because I was curious about that aspect of it, of like you like how do you tell a story for 30 years with the same cast of, and like and keep, some of these manga series just like go forever, and that's why I've never gotten into them,
Yeah.
because it's so overwhelming. And so I was like, this year I'm just going to read the first volume of a bunch of different series and then go back to the ones that I enjoyed the most. But yeah, I'm interested in
Yeah.
what the superhero genre looks like when you're not uh, rebooting the creative team every year, and you're not rebooting the universe every year, and you don't
Yeah.
have a cartoon show and a live action movie and a video game that's all multiverse. Like I just kind of,
Yeah.
it gets to be too much. But it's not like I've fallen out of love with the genre or anything. It's just the type of stories that I enjoy engaging with are, you know I like the feeling more of a connection to the creator, I guess, the creators of the story. But yeah, I'd like to do more with
Yeah.
Spandex.
I recently last
Was
week.
that?
Yeah. Recently last week I actually like binge read the entire Ultraman manga for like the newest run. It was like
Wow.
140 chapters. And one of the things that was nice was like every like 20 to 30 chapters they'd have like a little mini like 3 or 4 page like comic book of the creators, and they'd be like, oh, like we went to the Super Mario production because they want us to come over, and they had Ultraman there greet us and like in the suit and everything. And like later on when they like introduced Taro, they were like, they finally gave him his suit, and they were like, we didn't want to give him a suit, we liked his fire design, but everyone wanted him to have a suit, so here's his suit. And like it seems like later on in the comic book they seem to get more engaging with the audience. Like they're like, it's been a while, we've switched to like a monthly ish, if not bi-monthly release. Here's a comic of Ultra 7 going grocery shopping, like a little mini like, when it's just like, it's like really like a nice fresh like breath of air, because I've been reading a lot of American comics. They'd be like, yeah, like I could just read this whole one giant story and it just kind of flows, which I feel like webtoons kind of is like the American version of manga, kind of, where it's like you get these creators that work on like this single project, and like they'll have story arcs for them, but like you still get the same characters over
Yeah.
and over again, and you get to watch them develop. It's really rare with, I feel like, even like indie comics, where it's like, oh, like they'll do like a 5 issue run or something, and then like that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, so Spandex kind of came about because I was curious about the webtoon, like just as a um uh medium almost. Like
Like a
yeah,
platform.
and like
Yeah.
webtoon, it's like Kleenex, right? Like webtoon is the name of a brand, but it's so ubiquitous. It's kind of like the shorthand for that style of
Yeah.
continuous scroll, or what do they call it? Infinite scroll storytelling. That's what I was interested in, is like the infinite scroll. And so I definitely, they had a contest basically that was like, they were gonna have three people to make their I think they call it webtoon originals, where they actually pay you. And so I created the first couple episodes of Spandex for that contest, and kept it going because at that point I had a lot going on in my personal life. I knew I wasn't going to be able to like take on another Kickstarter campaign, but I was like, well, at least I can just like chip away at this, and every month or two, put out a new episode. And it I do like that format, but the way that I drew everything, like I can't just copy and paste that and make a comic. And and it feels
No.
like the webtoon audience is an entirely different audience than like people who read traditional US comics, and there's not a lot of crossover. So I would like to continue the webtoon, but I also feel like it'd be more worth my time to continue Spandex in traditional comic form. Um, I haven't quite
No, I
decided
can see
yet.
that.
Like I definitely I have so many ideas. I didn't want to be I didn't want to just be
Yeah.
like one more guy creating his own superhero universe. It's like no shade to people who are into that, but there's just so many. There's so
Yeah.
many, and I'm like I don't know
No.
that I have uh like I don't have a the whole thing about Spandex was there's no high concept. It's not like The Boys, where it's like, what if
Yeah.
superheroes were all terrible people? Or it's not like, um, the I don't know. There's no like. It's just superheroes. It's just like fun and wacky.
It has. Yeah. It has a very Invincible vibe to it. I mean, I think if anyone's into Invincible, they would they would love Spandex. I really enjoyed. I haven't read Invincible yet. Dan got me the first two compendiums, for my birthday back in October, and I'm gonna start keeping those in the car with me while I wait at the bus stop, and I'm gonna read a couple of comics while I wait. But yeah, I'm loving the
Yeah,
show, and if it's anything like the comics, I feel like
yeah.
it's got a big Spandex
It's
vibe.
I've enjoyed the show so far too, and it's interesting how they've adapted the stories from the comic and sort of streamline them a little bit to now that the comic is done, like he can go back and say, uh, there's so the big twist, right, of the show and the comic. There's a scene that in the cartoon is incredibly violent, and my memory of that in the comic was like, oh whoa, they went there. They made it as violent as the comic. And then I went back and looked at the comic, and most of the violence actually takes place off panel. And I thought that was really interesting. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
like the cartoon is showing me what my brain was imagining when I read the comic. You know, I don't know. I feel like it's really interesting when you do something well, right? When you have the original creators involved, uh, yeah, I mean, I've been impressed with that so far. It's been fun, and yeah, I just finished reading all of Invincible just in the last year. Um, I finally
Oh
finished the
wow.
whole series, but yeah, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that'll probably be the first superhero like comic book that I've read in years. I mean, I used to keep up with the DC Marvel stuff, but then the last like couple years, I'm like only kaiju stuff really and Toku related things is what I've been reading. Ninja Turtles is like the first like non kaiju Toku thing that I've been reading.
The
They did the Humble Bundle after they finished that
Okay,
IDW run, and I've just been blowing through the volumes. I'm almost done with
I'm
it at
like,
this
I think
point
I'm about
now.
halfway through. I've been slowly catching up on the Ninja Turtles stuff. Um, the original, like the
Yeah.
Archie comics Ninja Turtles based on the cartoon show. That's what got me into comics when I was a kid. That and like Sonic the Hedgehog. Like I wasn't really. I was a little too young. That like the '90s X-Men and Image stuff. Was like my parents weren't buying me that stuff, right? It was a little too edgy,
Yeah.
right, for me.
Yeah.
But like the Ninja Turtles, Sonic the Hedgehog, that was fine. Um, but even those were like surprisingly dark because at some point they diverged from like the tone of the cartoon series. And like one thing I constantly reference is they kill all the mute animals in the comics, and they don't come back to life or nothing. They just murder them all, and then they're dead. And then the Ninja Turtles like have a couple more adventures, and then the comic got canceled. But like, yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, so I'm curious to see if the IDW
Yeah.
series like goes that hard because honestly, like that was
So,
shocking to me as a child.
so there, the one of the recent volumes that I read ends with a. It's funny because it's like the holiday season. It ends with a almost Christmas Carol story with Splinter, and he gets visited by like three ghosts. And one of the things that's referenced in there is when he goes to see his future, is that the turtles kill him because he killed the
Huh?
mutanimals. So I don't know if they're gonna go there.
It's like like
But
possible future.
yeah, yeah, it was like a possible like alt future kind of thing. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the IDW comics. There was like a couple of slow points that I've been at in it with that, but I've been really impressed with the Ninja Turtle comics. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I've said for years, I like when the last Ronin came out, I'm like, oh, maybe I should read them because everyone was going crazy over that. But now I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I'm reading these.
I think that was. I don't know if I had started reading it before, but like when the last Ronin got announced, which I haven't read it yet, but like that was always my
Neither
that
have
was
I.
my pitch that I had in my back pocket. I'm like, if I ever get the chance to work on Ninja Turtles, I had this idea for a story, and then they announced it. I'm like, okay, well, you know, it was out there in the zeitgeist, I guess.
Like there goes my pitch.
But yeah, I had an idea of
They have the Ninja
I
Turtle
had like
spies.
my concept was just like, what if the other Ninja Turtles died and there's only one left? And I thought really long and hard about who I felt should be the last Ninja Turtle, and I still don't know. Like I have somehow managed to avoid spoilers. I don't know who the last Ronin is, and I'm curious if they picked the same turtle that I did. But yeah, I I don't know. Like turtles, that's obviously a huge inspiration for Bill the Platypus, and just in general, I've always gravitated to things that on the surface look ridiculous, and then they sort of like sneak in some very, um, like they go to some very interesting places.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I really liked Bill. It was like a fun story. I was like, oh man, like I do want to see more of Bill. Like you're saying, like Ninja Turtles. Maybe it's because of the Duck Bill. Obviously, I always got the '90s Mighty
Yeah,
Ducks cartoon vibe
Yes.
yeah.
from the design.
It,
But it's probably just because of the
I mean,
Duck Bill.
it
But
was hard. Like I've been drawing Bill the Platypus literally since like second grade. It's just been this character that I've always drawn, and I'll look at the
Yeah.
old drawings of when I was a kid, and I've always struggled with trying to like. I don't want him to look like Darkwing Duck or the Mighty Ducks. Like I want him to look different. Like we have seen so many duck characters in popular culture that every variation of drawing a Bill has been like you've got Daffy Duck, Donald Duck, Darkwing Duck. Like there's so many different ducks out there. I like trying to figure out a way of making his look different, and I still like even just the last couple days I'm catching up on some commissions I owe people from the Kickstarter campaign, and a couple people requested him, and I'm like playing with different ways of drawing his like neck and stuff because I'm just like I'm constantly not happy with how he looks. I don't know why. It's like it's a weird.
Yeah, I know.
It's like it's a love-hate relationship.
That was one of the things you put in the notes, dude. That was.
But yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it. The story is so weird. It has no anchor, like no. It's just like here's a platypus and he goes and hunts a chupacabra, like.
I loved it. I was like, oh man, we're gonna chupacabra story.
I thought it was great. I wasn't expecting the big one. First, I was like, oh, there's a little one, and then it's like, oh, there's a big one.
I think I did pretty good of hiding the big one. Like, I don't think I ever posted any pictures on social media of the big one. So, yeah, I don't know. That was fun. I'm glad
Spoilers.
people enjoyed it, and like I'd like to do more with Bill, and I'd like to like try to avoid it becoming too big of a story. I like the idea of just doing these weird little Bill adventures and then eventually having a collection of weird,
I like it. Yeah.
It was like kind of like to me it was like kind of like a modern day like film noir type of like like knocking on the PI's window like I got a case type of thing.
I mean.
Like it could just kind of go. Like,
the way I
wherever.
look at it is like we all grew up with the same cartoon shows and comics, and so like the idea, like I don't have to explain why there are some people who are animal hybrids. Like make whatever like green ooze, genetic experimentation.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, I actually do know, but I don't think it really matters to the reader. And if it ever comes up in the story, like it'll be because it's relevant to the story. But I didn't want to I didn't want that to be the focus, right? I didn't want this to be a story about why these people exist. It's like people can come up with their own ideas. Like it's fine,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And then the Space Monkey story was great too. In there, it was a great comic all around. I enjoyed it. The Space Monkey was super Star Warsy. And it was just so silly too. I was like, oh, I didn't know that's where this story was going with the whole ending there. I was like, oh, it's
what
the pop singer's taking over.
I want to keep doing them like that. I want to keep doing these like standalone issues with like a Bill the Platypus story and then a little Space Monkey backup, and then maybe reverse it. Maybe like do a big Space Monkey story with a little Bill the Platypus backup. Once in a while. But I don't know. For some reason, it seemed those were two things that I had drawn separately as just sample pages like years ago that I kind of reworked. I completely redrew the Bill the Platypus. That Space Monkey story, though, that was something I had drawn years ago that I just was still happy with and kind of felt like they fit. They're not technically in the same universe, but they have a lot of the same DNA in terms of influences. It goes. Yeah.
It's almost like a Saturday morning like platter.
Yeah,
like,
I like that.
They're not the same thing, but if you watch them back to back, it goes.
Yeah, I like that idea of like Saturday morning cartoon programming. You're gonna get up early and you're gonna watch your '90s X-Men and then your Ninja Turtles rip-offs like Street Sharks or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Biker Mice from Mars.
Oh man!
I think they brought that back recently.
What were the dinosaur? Was it a dinosaur group?
Yeah,
too?
I think
I think Dynamite's doing that
Extreme
one.
Dinosaurs.
Somebody's
Oh, the
doing
Micro
it.
Mice. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
but
I'm like trying to think. I'm like, I know.
and the what was it? The other one, the SWAT cats.
Um, Cowboys of Moo Mesa.
Uh,
I remember that one because where I used to play indoor soccer, they had an arcade game of that. So yeah.
Oh man, that's amazing. I did not know there was an arcade game of that. Yeah, the '90s were wild, man. So many talking animal cartoons.
Why do you think that? Like, I don't think
yeah.
I've ever. Why? Why is anthropomorphic? Like, why is that a thing? You know, like why? Why? I mean, because you could go
I
all the
don't
way
know.
back to you could all the way go back to like folk tales, right? We tell like you know, every culture
Exactly.
has like folk tales about animals, and did that just evolve to like Disney and I don't know.
I feel like to like a younger audience, seeing an animal versus seeing a human is much more entertaining.
It just makes it more fun. Yeah,
I feel like yeah, it's just like I see people all the time. I've never seen a talking
yeah,
cow before.
yeah. Like
Yeah, even
The
like
Redwall books by Brian Jacques. Um, like I'm thinking if those were if because I read those when I was younger, and if those were just about people, I'd probably think they were boring. But the exact same stories, if they're about mice and badgers and rabbits and stuff, like suddenly it's exciting and like you know, I don't know. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, like
I
Franklin.
feel like it just leaves like a little bit more room for creativity. Like the
Yeah.
Muppets, like you want to see a Muppets version of the Christmas Carol more than the
Sure.
Christmas Carol. Like, it's like you have a little bit more creative freedom with it to do kind of like more sillier, funner
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I know.
Like, can you imagine Ninja Turtles if it was people? Like, they live in the sewers, and like some weird old guy took them in and taught them martial arts instead of getting them help. And
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's fun.
They'd be like the mole people ninjas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
man.
So for this campaign, are there any like tiers or any rewards that you're like excited about, or like anything that you're like, oh, like this is like some cool things you have lined up for it, or is it
Um.
uh, kind of still kind of
Yeah,
in the
it's still in the
works?
works. I haven't talked to. Let me make sure I get their names right. It's like I think Jordan and Eric. Um. Yeah. So they're the two people who run Zoop. Um. So it has been a different experience than Kickstarter. Like I have a couple people to bounce ideas off of, and they're like whatever you want. Like we're here to support you and help make it a reality, but whatever you want to do. And I'm like, no, like tell me, like tell me what works. You guys you guys run this platform. You know what does well and what doesn't. In Kickstarter, you don't have any sort of you don't have anyone behind the scenes who's helping you make those decisions. But they've been very much like I'm like, how long can it be? They're like, however long you want it to be. I'm like, okay, like 100 pages, 150 pages, 200 pages. Like, so I had to make some decisions. In terms of like the reward tiers, probably going to be pretty simple. I mean, one of the conversations I had with him, I want this to be the most like accessible version of Stomped that like anyone can afford. So that's why like we talked about, do I want to do like an oversized hardcover edition? And it's like, no, let's just keep it simple, just like a standard size trade paperback. Um, because I want it to be, I don't want the cost to be a barrier to entry. I want to bring in new readers with this. So, so I
Yeah.
kind of, with that in mind, kind of informed some of the decisions I made about it, which isn't to say I couldn't do it like a deluxe, super deluxe version down the future. If there's one thing about comic book,
Super super
yeah,
mega
yeah,
deluxe.
comic book fans will buy the same thing over and over, right? You got to have the like collect the most recent edition. So
Yeah, no,
um,
definitely.
I I'm not I'm not including all of the sketchbook pages and back matter in it. So like that'll still be a special bonus for people who have the back to the Kickstarters. Um, I might offer that as like its own PDF, like maybe along with the Zoop collection, do like Stomp sketchbook PDF. Um, if people wanted to still get that material that didn't have it, and I have some pages. I've got um, Blind Date was drawn digitally, but I printed off the line art in blue line and had inked the pages, and I still have about half of those pages. And some of the other artists drew traditionally as well, so I might reach out to them and see if there's a way to offer some. Yeah, I don't know. Original art is such a very niche market, but I don't know. I think there's some people who'd be into that. I don't think I'm going to offer commissions like I have
Yeah.
with my Kickstarter campaigns, because I know if I do, I'll be ending up spending half the year catching up on commissions again, and I really want to go straight into working on the next volume of Stomped. Um, so pretty bare
Awesome.
bones
Yeah.
campaign, I think, compared to what I've done in the past, and I think that's the right call because I really just want like I want the definitive collection of these stories that I've been spent like the last 5 years, you know, chipping away at. I want something that is easy
Yeah.
to even like, hand to publishers and editors and retailers. Like uh, yeah, that's kind of my thinking going behind this campaign, and it just logistically like,
Yeah.
shipping one single issue of a comic
No, it makes
versus
sense.
a book that's going to end up being like that thick, right? You're increasing
Yeah.
production and shipping costs. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I feel like sometimes with these campaigns, like, you have like four or five different variant covers, stickers, T-shirts, extras, and I'm just like, that's just way more shipping cost and like different SKUs you have to keep
mhm.
track of, and like, you know, you're just trying to sell a book, like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now you have merch to worry about, and
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to go, especially because a lot of your current backers will have already been able to get commissions and stuff. But this, like you said, you're trying to get the book out there. It's the ultimate edition of Stomped. That's a great way to go. I think that's a perfect idea. It'll make it a lot easier too, because there's less things to
yeah,
produce, and it'll just go right out there, and we'll be able to get the next volume of Stomp sooner.
yep. And it's my first time, launching something on Zoop. So I don't want to overthink it or add extra work for everyone. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, I mean the comics are basically done. It's just like the new store, the two is it two new
so yeah.
stories?
So it's a 12-page news story that I'm drawing, and then the 6-page prologue that is like the art jam style everyone's chipping
Yes,
into.
that's really cool. I'm excited to see
Yeah,
those and read them in
I
order.
should have some. I don't know, like over the next few weeks, I'll kind of keep posting more art as it gets done or as people send it to me. So yeah,
No, we're definitely looking forward to it, man. Like I said, been sticking with you for the whole time, and you're a busy man. That's for sure. I mean, you got a lot of ideas up in there. Great artist, great writer. I mean, we can't say anything more about you, man. You're
thank
absolutely
you,
incredible.
I'm,
I think you're a really special talent when it comes to
thank
comics.
you. So many of these ideas, like, there's things that have been floating in my brain for years and years and years, and so it probably seems like, how's he coming up with all this? And it's like you're seeing you're seeing 30 plus years of ideas and imagination, like all me finally having an outlet for it and over the last few years. So the only thing holding me back is just I've got bills to pay and only so many hours in a day. Um, but I've been enjoying it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We feel you,
I'm
man.
so grateful. Like, one of the things that's been surprising and very uh, makes me feel good is the average backer count on all of my Kickstarters hasn't really grown substantially, but the average pledge level has. Some of that is people coming on to later campaigns and picking up the past issues, but like some of it is people might have backed the first couple issues and then the third or fourth one they're like, I want to get a commission this time as well. And so it's nice to see the same names like you guys and other people who've been kind of coming back campaign after campaign, and sometimes like you just see the username, so I don't necessarily even know people's actual names. I wouldn't recognize them if I bumped into them at a convention or something. But I do like it when people. I've only tabled twice at conventions. I've tabled at Rose City Comic Con twice, and it's fun when people are like, "Hey, like I'm so and so." I'm like, I don't know who you are, and then they give me some context. So like I'm this on Instagram or I'm this on Twitter or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know who you are. Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. It's I mean, the convention seems so cool. I mean, we only get to do so many conventions a year, visit so many conventions a year, and it's cool. Like the last couple we went to, like we've tried to do more kaiju things. Like we've like ran into people and we're like, oh, we know people for once. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate everything. Love talking to you. It was a good time.
Yeah, can't wait for the.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys so much.
Definitely be.
And we'll talk to you soon.